The gleaming 747 sat motionless on the tarmac as furious passengers filmed Dr. Jeremiah Washington confronting the trembling flight attendant. "My children are Harvard students, not criminals," he thundered, while airline security approached with hands on holsters. His twins huddled together, tears streaming down their faces. Before we dive into this shocking story, where are you watching from today? Hit that like button and subscribe if you've ever witnessed discrimination while traveling. You won't believe how this respected doctor stood up for his brilliant children when an airline tried to humiliate them in front of everyone. Dr. Jeremiah Washington checked his leather planner one final time before closing his office door at Baltimore Memorial Hospital. After 15 years as head of neurosurgery, he had finally cleared his demanding schedule for a much-needed 2-week vacation. This trip to Paris wasn't just any family getaway, it represented healing for a family still grieving. "Everything set for tomorrow, Dad?" Zion Washington asked, his voice carrying the polished tone of a Harvard pre-law sophomore as he helped his father load luggage into their Lexus SUV. "First-class tickets, 5-star hotel overlooking the Seine, museum passes, all confirmed," Dr. Washington replied, his usual surgical precision applied to vacation planning. "Your mother would have loved seeing you two experience Paris." The mention of Sarah Washington brought a momentary heaviness. 2 years had passed since cancer took her, but certain moments still carried raw pain. Paris had been their honeymoon destination 22 years ago, and this trip represented a promise kept to Sarah before her passing, to take the twins there when they turned 19. "Zara's still packing," Zion laughed, lightening the mood. Apparently studying neuroscience at Harvard requires bringing 14 outfits for 14 days. Inside their spacious Bethesda home, Zara Washington carefully folded designer clothes into her suitcase while practicing French phrases. With perfect pronunciation, she rehearsed conversations about museum exhibits and historical landmarks. Both twins had inherited their father's brilliant mind, Zion heading toward law like his maternal grandfather, while Zara followed her father's medical path. "I've downloaded walking tours of all the sites Mom photographed," Zara announced when her father entered. "We can stand in the exact spots." That evening, the Washington family gathered in the living room with old photo albums. Sarah's smiling face appeared before the Eiffel Tower, Notre Dame, and quaint cafes. Each image represented a memory they would honor by recreating with the bittersweet absence of the woman who should have guided them. "She always said Paris changed her, Dr. Washington shared, touching a faded photo. "The art, history, culture, it expanded her world. That's what I want for you both." Morning arrived with anxious excitement. Their flight would depart at 11:30 a.m., but Dr. Washington's meticulous planning had them arriving at Dulles International Airport 3 hours early. The terminal bustled with summer travelers as they approached the Sky Global Airlines premium counter. "Good morning," Dr. Washington greeted the agent warmly. "Washington family, first class to Paris." The ticketing agent's smile faltered slightly as she glanced between the passports and their faces. "I'll need to see your credit card again, sir," she requested, despite having already verified it once. Zion and Zara exchanged knowing glances, the familiar microaggression of assumed fraud. Their father maintained his dignified demeanor, sliding his platinum card across the counter a second time. "Everything appears in order," the agent finally conceded, her tone suggesting surprise. "Enjoy your flight, Dr. Washington." As they navigated security and made their way to the first-class lounge, Zara noticed a store clerk watching them suspiciously while warmly greeting white customers. Zion spotted a security officer following their movements until he recognized Dr. Washington from a hospital fundraiser. Just like always, Zion whispered to his sister. "Harvard credentials don't matter when they see our skin first." The Sky Global Airlines flagship Boeing 747 gleamed impressively at Gate C-12. As premium passengers, the Washington family joined the priority boarding line, where flight attendant Brenda Patterson greeted travelers with practiced enthusiasm. "Welcome aboard," she beamed at the Bryant family ahead of them, a white couple with 3 rambunctious children who darted around the jetway unsupervised. When the Washingtons presented their boarding passes, Brenda's smile tightened. "These are first-class tickets," she stated unnecessarily, examining them longer than others. "Yes, we're aware," Dr. Washington replied calmly. Aboard the aircraft, they settled into luxurious seats 2A, 2B, and 2C. Across the aisle, a distinguished silver-haired man in seat 2D observed the interaction with interest. Unknown to the crew and passengers, Douglas Phillips, Sky Global Airline CEO, traveled incognito to experience his company's service firsthand. Several rows behind them, Amanda Taylor organized legal briefs in seat 5A. The prominent civil rights attorney was heading to an international law conference, unaware she would soon witness a case unfolding before her eyes. As champagne and orange juice circulated through the first-class cabin, Dr. Washington noticed the Bryant children receiving extra attention from Brenda while his own accomplished children waited, unacknowledged with empty glasses. "Paris, finally," Zara whispered excitedly, unaware of the turbulence ahead that had nothing to do with weather. The massive jet engines roared to life as Flight 1283 prepared for departure. Inside the first-class cabin, most passengers had settled comfortably with pre-takeoff beverages, except the Washington twins. "Excuse me," Zara raised her hand politely as flight attendant Brenda Patterson passed by for the third time. "Could we possibly get some water before takeoff?" Brenda's smile faltered. "I'll be with you shortly," she replied curtly before rushing to refill 7-year-old Timmy Bryant's apple juice across the aisle. Zion placed a reassuring hand on his sister's arm. At Harvard, they had developed an unspoken language for these situations, the subtle instances of differential treatment that individually could be dismissed but collectively formed an unmistakable pattern. The seatbelt sign illuminated, and Brenda began her final cabin check. She approached the Bryant family with warmth, complimenting their children's matching outfits and casually accepting little Timmy's feet on the pristine seat fabric. When she reached the Washington twins, her demeanor transformed. "Your bags need to go completely under the seats," she instructed sternly, despite their bags already being properly stowed. She checked their seatbelts with unusual scrutiny, tugging them in a manner she hadn't done with other passengers. Dr. Washington observed from his aisle seat, his surgical calm masking growing concern. Throughout his distinguished career, he had learned to navigate these waters carefully, choosing battles wisely while teaching his children the unfortunate necessity of exceeding expectations just to be treated equally. After a smooth takeoff, the service began. The Bryant children bounced between seats, yet Brenda indulgently called them spirited. When Zara retrieved her noise-canceling headphones from her bag, Brenda immediately appeared. "Please keep your belongings stowed," she admonished. "I just needed my headphones," Zara explained politely. "I already gave you headphones," Brenda replied dismissively. "No, you didn't," Zara corrected gently. "Our row hasn't received any yet." Brenda's eyes narrowed. "Are you saying I'm lying?" The question hung awkwardly in the air as nearby passengers glanced over. Dr. Washington intervened smoothly. "There seems to be a misunderstanding. We haven't received headphones yet, but it's no problem. We can wait." 20 minutes later, Brenda distributed amenity kits to first-class passengers. She placed the Bryant family's kits carefully in their hands with explicit instructions about the luxurious contents. When she reached the Washingtons, she dropped the kits on their tray tables without comment and quickly moved on. Amanda Taylor, the civil rights attorney in row 5, had been observing these interactions with professional interest. She discreetly began recording on her phone. When Zion needed to use the restroom, he unbuckled and stood in the aisle, waiting patiently as Brenda assisted another passenger. Instead of acknowledging him, she deliberately turned away, busying herself with unnecessary cabinet organization. After waiting several minutes, Zion stepped toward the lavatory. Brenda suddenly blocked his path. "Excuse me, where are you going?" she demanded loudly enough for nearby passengers to hear. "To the restroom," Zion replied, maintaining his composure despite the public confrontation. "Let me see your boarding pass," Brenda insisted. "First-class passengers only in this section." Heat rose in Zion's face as he felt eyes on him. I'm seated in 2B. I've been there since boarding. I need to verify that, she persisted, despite having checked his ticket during boarding and twice during beverage service. From his seat, Dr. Washington witnessed his son, a straight-A Harvard student with a pristine disciplinary record, being treated like an intruder. The scene triggered memories of his own experiences, being mistaken for hospital janitorial staff despite wearing a white coat with Dr. Washington embroidered on it, being questioned by security when entering medical conferences, watching patients request the real doctor when he entered their rooms. He had hoped his children's generation would face less of this. He had believed their achievements might shield them. He had been wrong. Another flight attendant, Kevin Miller, watched the interaction with visible discomfort. When Brenda finally allowed Zion to pass, Kevin approached her near the galley. "Everything okay with 2B?" he asked quietly. "Just keeping an eye on those two," Brenda whispered back. "Something feels off. They're moving around too much." Kevin frowned slightly. "The Bryant kids have been up 6 times already." "That's different," Brenda replied dismissively before adding, "My brother applied to Harvard twice. Rejected both times. But these two got in. Please." As service continued, Brenda carried a tray of drinks. She served Douglas Phillips in 2D carefully, then turned toward Zara in 2A. As she extended the drink, her hand slipped, spilling cranberry juice across Zara's white designer blouse. "Oh!" Brenda exclaimed with exaggerated concern that didn't reach her eyes. "Let me get you some napkins." Zara gasped as the cold liquid soaked through to her skin, the crimson stain spreading across expensive fabric. "I'm so sorry," Brenda said with a slight smirk barely concealed beneath her professional mask. "Turbulence, you know." The cabin had been smooth as glass for 30 minutes. Cranberry juice dripped from Zara's once pristine white blouse, creating a spreading stain impossible to miss. Her composed expression cracked momentarily before she regained control, reaching for the tiny cocktail napkin Brenda had carelessly tossed on her tray table. "I'll need more napkins, please," Dr. Washington stated firmly, recognizing the deliberate nature of the accident. "I'll see what I can find when I'm not busy," Brenda replied before immediately attending to another passenger's minor request across the aisle. Zion discreetly handed his sister additional napkins he'd saved from earlier service. "Remember Professor Wilkins' lecture on microaggressions becoming macroaggressions?" he whispered. "Textbook case." Dr. Washington pressed the call button twice. Brenda visibly noticed the illuminated light but continued serving others. After 5 minutes, Kevin Miller finally responded. "How can I help?" he asked, genuinely concerned at the obvious spill. "My daughter needs napkins and club soda for this stain," Dr. Washington explained. "Your colleague said she was too busy to assist." Kevin's eyes registered surprise as he quickly gathered supplies. "I'm very sorry about that. Let me get this cleaned up right away." As Kevin helped Zara, Brenda watched from the galley with narrowed eyes. When he returned, she cornered him. "Don't undermine me with those passengers," she hissed. "They're trouble." "They seem perfectly pleasant to me," Kevin countered quietly. "The daughter hasn't complained once about her ruined blouse." "You're not seeing what I'm seeing," Brenda insisted. "The son keeps passing things to his sister. Whispering. They're up to something." Kevin looked confused. "They're siblings sharing earbuds to watch a movie." Indeed, Zion had offered Zara his entertainment system since hers had malfunctioned. They huddled together, sharing earbuds while watching a film to distract from the humiliating situation. This ordinary sibling behavior became twisted through Brenda's biased lens. She approached Nathan Blackwell, the flight purser, with manufactured concern. "The 2 young passengers in 2A and 2B keep whispering and passing items between them," she reported. "They seem suspicious." Nathan frowned. "What exactly are they passing?" "I couldn't see clearly," Brenda admitted. "But it's making other passengers uncomfortable." This was a fabrication, no passengers had expressed concern. In fact, Amanda Taylor in row 5 had documented multiple instances of Brenda's targeted behavior while the Washingtons responded with remarkable restraint. Nathan, though hesitant, deferred to Brenda's 8 years of seniority. Keep an eye on them, but don't escalate unless necessary. Taking this as authorization, Brenda marched purposefully to row 2. She loomed over the twins, who removed their shared earbuds and looked up questioningly. "What are you two exchanging?" she demanded loudly. Zara blinked in confusion. "Sorry. I've noticed suspicious movements between you," Brenda continued, her voice carrying. "Multiple passengers have expressed concerns." The accusation hung in the air as nearby passengers turned to watch the unfolding drama. Dr. Washington set aside his medical journal. "My children are sharing headphones because my daughter's entertainment system isn't working," he explained calmly. "Is there a problem with that?" "Sir, I'm handling a security concern," Brenda replied dismissively. "I need to know what they've been passing between seats." "Earbuds," Zion stated clearly. "We're watching The French Connection together since we're going to Paris." Brenda's expression hardened. "I need to see identification from both of you." Dr. Washington intervened. "This is ridiculous. These are my children. We've presented passports, boarding passes, and identification multiple times already." "Sir, I'm following security protocols," Brenda insisted, though no such protocol existed for passengers already aboard and verified. "I'm Dr. Jeremiah Washington, Chief of Neurosurgery at Baltimore Memorial," he stated, presenting his medical credentials. "These are my children, both Harvard University students." "What exactly is your concern?" Brenda barely glanced at his identification. Anyone can claim impressive credentials or print fake IDs. The implication was clear and cutting: their accomplishments were being dismissed as improbable because of their race. "That's enough," Dr. Washington stated firmly, parental protection overriding professional restraint. "I want to speak with your supervisor immediately." Other passengers reacted with mixed responses. Some looked away uncomfortably, others watched with undisguised interest, and a few began recording the interaction on phones. The distinguished man in 2D, still unrecognized as CEO Douglas Phillips, observed with growing concern while taking notes in a small leather notebook. "Is there a problem here?" Amanda Taylor asked, approaching from row 5. "This doesn't concern you," Brenda replied curtly. "Actually, as a civil rights attorney specializing in public accommodation discrimination, I believe it might," Amanda replied, her credentials immediately shifting the power dynamic. The cabin atmosphere tensed further when Captain Benjamin Harris's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We've been informed of a possible security situation in the cabin. Please remain seated while our crew addresses the matter." Brenda smiled triumphantly at the announcement, having contacted the cockpit during her brief return to the galley. The public announcement transformed a routine flight into a security situation centered on 2 innocent college students. "Security protocol requires these passengers be separated for questioning," Brenda announced with authority she didn't actually possess. "Absolutely not," Dr. Washington replied. "My children have done nothing wrong." "Then you leave me no choice," Brenda threatened. "Either they comply voluntarily, or I'll have security remove all of you when we land in Chicago for our connection." Douglas Phillips, unable to remain silent any longer, pressed his call button. The fate of the Washington family now hung in the balance at 35,000 feet. The atmosphere in the first-class cabin crackled with tension as Brenda deliberately ignored CEO Douglas Phillips' call button, focusing instead on what she perceived as her moment of authority over the Washington family. The situation had escalated far beyond a simple misunderstanding, becoming a power struggle with racial undertones impossible to ignore. Instead of Captain Harris, First Officer James Rodriguez emerged from the cockpit, his expression concerned as he surveyed the scene. "What's the situation?" he asked professionally. Before Brenda could answer, Zion Washington spoke with the measured clarity of a pre-law student who had thoroughly studied civil rights legislation. "Sir, we're experiencing what appears to be discriminatory treatment. We've been repeatedly singled out while other passengers engaging in identical behaviors haven't been questioned." Brenda immediately interrupted, "He's being hostile and threatening. This is exactly the behavior I've been reporting." The accusation was so blatantly false that several nearby passengers audibly gasped. Zion had spoken calmly and articulately, nowhere near threatening. Rodriguez looked uncertainly between them. "Perhaps we could discuss this privately." "I've documented 7 separate instances of targeted behavior toward these passengers," Amanda Taylor interjected, holding up her phone. "As an attorney, I'm concerned about potential violations of federal aviation anti-discrimination regulations." The mention of documented evidence and federal regulations shifted Rodriguez's demeanor. "Captain Harris is monitoring the situation. I should consult with him." As Rodriguez stepped away, Dr. Washington discreetly sent a text message to Dr. Anthony Parker, a hospital colleague who served on the Airport Authority Board. The message was brief but urgent: "Experiencing blatant discrimination on Sky Global 1283. May need intervention upon arrival. Family being treated as security threat without cause. Would you have stood up to this flight attendant's discriminatory behavior?" Comment number 1 if you believe Dr. Washington was right to defend his children, or number 2 if you think he should have complied to avoid escalation. Like this video if you've ever witnessed discrimination while traveling, and subscribe to hear how this powerful father fought back against injustice. What do you think will happen when ground security arrives? The Washington family's nightmare is about to reach new heights. While everyone waited anxiously, Dr. Washington reflected on a moment 6 months earlier, an emergency surgery he performed on a 10-year-old boy with a traumatic brain injury after a car accident. The operation had been challenging, requiring 16 grueling hours, but the child had made a miraculous recovery. What Dr. Washington didn't know was that this young patient was Captain Benjamin Harris's beloved nephew. The tense silence broke when Brenda made a coded announcement over the cabin phone: "Ground staff, we have situation code 27 in first class. Prepare for priority intervention upon arrival." Code 27, the designation for potentially dangerous passengers requiring immediate security response. Kevin Miller, the other flight attendant, pulled Nathan Blackwell aside near the galley. "Nathan, I need to say something. I've worked with Brenda for 3 years, and this isn't the first time she's singled out passengers of color. Last month on the Singapore route." "Not now, Kevin," Nathan interrupted, though his expression showed conflict. "We have to back our team. Even when they're wrong." Kevin challenged quietly. The aircraft began its descent into Chicago O'Hare International Airport. As the plane taxied to the gate, passengers could see 2 airport security vehicles with flashing lights positioned on the tarmac, an alarming response typically reserved for serious threats. Dr. Washington maintained his composure while privately seething at the humiliation being inflicted on his accomplished children. Zara, still wearing her stained blouse, gripped her brother's hand tightly as anxiety mounted. Security Officer Troy Bennett boarded first, accompanied by 2 additional officers. He scanned the cabin until his eyes landed on Dr. Washington. "Dr. Washington?" he asked with evident surprise. "You're the security concern. You know him?" Brenda asked sharply. "He performed emergency surgery on my mother last year," Officer Bennett explained. "Saved her life after an aneurysm other doctors said was inoperable." This unexpected connection created visible confusion among the security team, who had been prepared for potentially dangerous passengers, not a renowned neurosurgeon and his college student children. "These passengers have been exhibiting suspicious behavior," Brenda insisted, doubling down despite the collapsing narrative. Whispering, passing items between them, refusing to comply with crew instructions. "What items specifically?" Officer Bennett asked. "I couldn't see exactly," Brenda admitted reluctantly. Earbuds, several nearby passengers supplied simultaneously. The absurdity of the situation was becoming apparent to everyone, except Brenda, who remained committed to her fabricated security concern. "There's more to it than that," she insisted desperately. They've been confrontational and made other passengers uncomfortable. Which passengers? Officer Bennett asked reasonably. Brenda gestured vaguely, unable to identify a single person who had actually complained. Meanwhile, Captain Harris had received surprising information in the cockpit, a direct message from the airline's executive office regarding the situation, plus the realization that the Dr. Washington on his flight was the same surgeon who had saved his nephew's life. Douglas Phillips had finally been recognized by a flight attendant who had seen him at a company function. His presence transformed the dynamic completely, especially when he stood and addressed Officer Bennett directly. "I believe we have a serious situation here, but not the one reported," Phillips stated with quiet authority. "I've observed systematic differential treatment of these passengers since boarding." "Who are you, sir?" Bennett asked respectfully. "Douglas Phillips, Chief Executive Officer of Sky Global Airlines," he replied, creating an audible ripple of whispers throughout the cabin. Brenda's face drained of color as she realized her actions had unfolded under the direct observation of the company's highest authority. "I believe we should review the documented evidence," Phillips continued, gesturing toward Amanda Taylor's phone. "And I'd like statements from surrounding passengers about what they've witnessed." The power had shifted dramatically. What began as one flight attendant's attempt to exert authority over passengers she had prejudged had transformed into a potential career-ending moment for her and a corporate crisis for the airline. As Brenda realized her precarious position, she made one last desperate attempt. Their luggage seemed unusually heavy during boarding. "I was concerned about undeclared items." This final fabrication pushed Dr. Washington's patience to its limit. "Officer Bennett, I insist our carry-on items be inspected immediately to put these absurd accusations to rest." Bennett looked uncomfortable but nodded. "If you consent to a search, we can resolve this quickly." Zion opened his backpack to reveal textbooks on constitutional law, a Harvard sweatshirt, and wrapped gifts, Parisian chocolates for his roommate and a small Eiffel Tower sculpture for his debate coach. Zara's bag contained similar innocuous items, including her mother's Paris photo journal she planned to recreate. The evidence of Brenda's bias was now undeniable, witnessed by a plane full of passengers, security officers, fellow crew members, and the company's CEO himself. The inspection of the Washington twins' entirely innocent luggage created a pivotal moment on Flight 1283. Officer Bennett zipped Zion's backpack closed with an apologetic nod while nearby passengers exchanged uncomfortable glances, the reality of what they were witnessing impossible to ignore or rationalize away. "So they're just regular college students going on vacation," a passenger in row 3 stated loudly. "All this drama for nothing." "Not for nothing," corrected an elderly woman sitting beside him. "I heard that flight attendant tell another crew member earlier that she doesn't believe those people belong in first class." Her exact words. This bombshell revelation rippled through the cabin. Multiple passengers nodded in confirmation, having overheard similar comments. The evidence of prejudice mounted with each passing minute. Kevin Miller, who had been conflicted about speaking up, finally approached Captain Harris, who had emerged from the cockpit. "Captain, I need to report something. This isn't Brenda's first incident like this. Last month on the Singapore route, she reported a Nigerian businessman for suspicious behavior that turned out to be him taking medication for high blood pressure. And in March, she had a Hispanic family moved from first class claiming seating errors when their documents were perfectly in order." Captain Harris's expression darkened as he processed this information. "Why wasn't this reported?" "It was," Kevin replied quietly. "Twice. But nothing happened." Meanwhile, Douglas Phillips was texting rapidly on his phone, communicating directly with Vivian Carter, Sky Global's VP of Operations. "Need immediate remote access to Patterson's personnel file. Potential discrimination situation unfolding on 1283. I'm witnessing firsthand." The response came quickly, file accessed. 3 previous complaints buried in secondary review system. Never reached final disciplinary stage. Investigating who intercepted them. As this corporate investigation unfolded silently, Captain Harris approached Dr. Washington with an extended hand. "Dr. Washington. Benjamin Harris. I believe you operated on my nephew, Tyler, after his accident in February." Dr. Washington's eyes widened in recognition. Tyler Harris. Traumatic subdural hematoma following the multi-vehicle collision on I-95. Remarkable recovery. You saved his life when 3 other surgeons said it was hopeless, Captain Harris said, emotion evident in his voice. He's back in school now. Barely even a scar. This personal connection created an extraordinary moment. The airline captain whose authority had been invoked to treat the Washington family as security threats was personally indebted to Dr. Washington for saving his beloved nephew. Amanda Taylor, still documenting everything, approached with her credentials. "Captain Harris, I've compiled statements from 7 passengers who witnessed discriminatory treatment. As a civil rights attorney, I'm concerned about potential violations of federal aviation regulations and several civil rights statutes." As these conversations converged, Zara suddenly pressed her hand to her chest, her breathing becoming rapid and shallow. The mounting stress of public humiliation triggered an anxiety attack, something she had experienced occasionally since her mother's death. "Zara?" Dr. Washington immediately recognized the symptoms, medical training overtaking everything else. "Deep breaths, sweetheart. Focus on my voice." The sight of a young woman in distress shifted the energy in the cabin yet again. Dr. Washington's medical expertise became immediately apparent as he calmly helped his daughter through breathing exercises while checking her pulse. "Should we call for medical assistance?" Captain Harris asked with concern. "I am the medical assistant," Dr. Washington replied without looking up. "She's having an anxiety attack triggered by stress. Something no 19-year-old should experience for simply existing in first class while black." The bluntness of his statement landed heavily in the cabin. Several passengers looked away, uncomfortable with the unvarnished truth. Ground Supervisor Alicia Reynolds boarded the aircraft, tablet in hand. "I have direct instructions from corporate to address this situation immediately," she announced, having received urgent communications from the executive offices. What no one had yet realized was that Brenda Patterson's antagonism toward the Washington family had deeper roots than random prejudice. As Douglas Phillips continued receiving information on his phone, a crucial detail emerged. Thomas Patterson, Brenda's brother, had been passed over for a surgical residency at Johns Hopkins 3 years earlier. The position had gone to a highly qualified black candidate whose accomplishments Brenda had resented ever since, a resentment she transferred to the accomplished Washington twins. As Alicia reviewed the situation, Zion calmly articulated the family's experience. "We've been subjected to different standards than other passengers since boarding. Our movements were questioned when others were not. Our credentials were doubted repeatedly. A drink was deliberately spilled on my sister. And ultimately, we were labeled a security threat for sharing earbuds to watch a movie." His composed delivery, backed by a Harvard-trained understanding of relevant laws, made the discrimination impossible to dismiss. "Sky Global has a non-discrimination policy that appears to have been violated," Alicia acknowledged, her professionalism not masking her dismay at the situation. Meanwhile, Douglas Phillips finally formally identified himself to the cabin crew. "This situation requires immediate resolution," he stated firmly. "I've witnessed clear violations of company policy and possibly federal law." Brenda's face cycled through shock, disbelief, and fear as she realized the CEO had been silently observing her behavior throughout the flight. "Mr. Phillips, I can explain," she began desperately. "I believe the evidence speaks for itself," Phillips interrupted. "Multiple witnesses, documented incidents, and a pattern of similar behavior in your file." "My file? How did you?" Brenda stopped, realizing she was only incriminating herself further. The revelation of Douglas Phillips' identity transformed the power dynamic completely. What had begun as one flight attendant's attempt to exert authority over passengers she had prejudged had become a corporate crisis unfolding in real time, with passengers documenting every moment on their phones. "Dar. Washington," Phillips addressed him directly, on behalf of Sky Global Airlines, I want to personally apologize for the treatment you and your children have experienced. It's inexcusable and does not reflect our company values." As the Washington family finally began to see justice unfolding, the broader implications of the incident were just beginning to surface. Phones throughout the cabin had been recording, and the hashtag #FlyingWhileBlack was already trending as passengers shared what they had witnessed. What had begun as a dream family vacation to Paris was transforming into something far more significant, a very public reckoning with the reality that even the highest achievements and credentials didn't shield Black Americans from the persistent sting of prejudice. As the standoff continued in the now stationary aircraft, Brenda Patterson made one final desperate attempt to salvage her position. Their luggage seemed unusually heavy during boarding, she insisted to Alicia Reynolds. "I was concerned about undeclared items or weight distribution issues affecting aircraft safety." This claim, like her previous accusations, crumbled immediately under scrutiny. First Officer Rodriguez confirmed that no weight distribution concerns had been reported during pre-flight checks, and the twins' carry-on items had already been inspected and found completely ordinary. With all her fabrications exposed, Brenda shifted tactics. "I'm being singled out here," she claimed with surprising audacity. "One misunderstanding is being blown completely out of proportion. 7 documented incidents don't constitute a misunderstanding," Amanda Taylor countered firmly. "They establish a pattern." The confrontation had effectively grounded the aircraft. Captain Harris announced over the intercom, "Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for the delay. We're addressing a crew situation and expect to resume our journey shortly. Those with connecting flights will be accommodated." Frustrated sighs echoed through the cabin as passengers realized their travel plans were now disrupted. Some directed their annoyance toward the airline, while others unfairly blamed the Washington family for causing a scene, despite them having been the victims throughout. Dr. Washington, seeing the mixed reactions, stood to address his fellow passengers with the same commanding presence that had guided surgical teams through life-or-death operations. "I understand everyone's frustration with the delay," he began, his deep voice carrying natural authority. "But I hope you'll consider what's actually happening here. My children, both straight-A Harvard students who have never had so much as a parking ticket, were treated as criminals for sharing earbuds. Their academic credentials were dismissed as fake. Their presence in first class was repeatedly questioned." He paused, looking directly at families with children. "Imagine your son or daughter being humiliated this way while simply trying to watch a movie. Imagine them being labeled a security threat for absolutely nothing." His words resonated powerfully, shifting the mood in the cabin. Several passengers nodded in understanding. "Excellence didn't protect them," Dr. Washington continued. "Their Harvard IDs didn't protect them. My medical credentials didn't protect them. And that reality, that painful truth, is something Black families live with every day." The cabin fell silent as his words landed with undeniable moral force. Even those who had been annoyed by the delay seemed to reflect on the larger principles at stake. Outside the aircraft, the situation was escalating in different ways. News vans had already arrived at O'Hare International Airport after Dr. Washington's journalist friend, Pulitzer Prize winner James Turner, broke the story. Social media videos taken by passengers had gone viral, with the hashtag #FlyingWhileBlack trending nationally. Sky Global's crisis management team, led by communications director Rachel Howard, rushed to gate C-15 where the aircraft remained parked. The corporate damage control machinery was spinning up, but they were already behind the rapidly unfolding story. Inside the plane, passengers had divided into clear factions: vocal supporters of the Washington family, uncomfortable bystanders trying to remain neutral, and a small minority who seemed irritated by the inconvenience rather than the injustice. Brenda, sensing her increasing isolation, attempted to rally support from this last group. "We're just trying to ensure everyone's safety," she said loudly to an older white couple who had been complaining about missing their connection. "Sometimes that requires extra vigilance." The coded language, the implication that Black passengers inherently required extra vigilance, was transparent to many listening. That's exactly the problem, Kevin Miller stated firmly, breaking ranks with his colleague. Some passengers face extra vigilance, based solely on their appearance, while others can break rules without consequence. To illustrate his point, he gestured toward the Bryant children, who were once again roaming the aisles unsupervised while flight attendants had threatened to have the Washington twins removed for sharing earbuds. Douglas Phillips, still seated in 2D, made a decisive call to Vivian Carter, "Have Patricia Williams meet us at the gate immediately. We need senior leadership with direct experience handling discrimination issues." Patricia Williams, Sky Global's black female vice president of operations, was known for her no-nonsense approach and commitment to institutional change. Her presence would signal the company's serious intent to address the situation properly. Meanwhile, Dr. Washington received a call from Dr. Anthony Parker on the airport board. "Jeremiah, I've alerted TSA leadership about what's happening. They're reviewing security camera footage from boarding. The supervisor confirmed no legitimate security concerns were ever raised about your family. This was fabricated entirely by the flight attendant." This information provided additional official confirmation of what passengers had witnessed: a routine flight transformed into a security incident through one crew member's biased actions. As these developments converged, Brenda made her final desperate stand: "I'm calling my union representative. This is a witch hunt against a flight attendant with an exemplary record." Amanda Taylor calmly pulled up Federal Aviation Administration records on her tablet. "Actually, I've identified 3 previous incidents resulting in passenger complaints about your conduct, Ms. Patterson. All involved passengers of color who reported treatment remarkably similar to what the Washington family experienced today." The revelation that Amanda had accessed official records beyond what CEO Phillips had discovered internally silenced Brenda momentarily. "How did you find those?" she demanded. "Public records request tracking FAA complaint patterns by employee ID number," Amanda explained. "I specialize in transportation discrimination cases." With her professional record now exposed, Brenda switched tactics again. "If I'm removed from this flight, I'll file a wrongful termination lawsuit. I know my rights." "As do I," Zion stated quietly but firmly, displaying the composure and legal knowledge that had earned him top marks at Harvard Law. Federal aviation regulations prohibit discriminatory treatment based on race. Title VI of the Civil Rights Act prohibits discrimination by air carriers. The Air Carrier Access Act provides additional protections. I can continue if you'd like. His articulate citation of relevant laws, delivered without anger despite the humiliation he'd endured, commanded respect from everyone listening, including Douglas Phillips, who made a note in his small leather notebook. The standoff had reached its breaking point. The flight remained grounded, passengers were missing connections, and a major airline was experiencing a very public discrimination crisis with potential legal, financial, and reputational consequences. As Patricia Williams arrived at the jet bridge, prepared to board and address the situation with the full authority of corporate leadership, the next phase of the confrontation was about to begin, and the Washington family's ordeal was far from over. Patricia Williams, Sky Global's vice president of operations, entered the aircraft with purposeful strides. Her presence immediately commanded attention, a powerful black woman in her 50s whose rise through corporate ranks had been marked by both exceptional competence and a fearless approach to addressing systemic problems. "Mr. Phillips," she acknowledged the CEO with professional courtesy before turning to Dr. Washington. "Dr. Washington, I understand your family has experienced unacceptable treatment on our airline today. I'd like to address this immediately. The executive conference room at our O'Hare hub is prepared," she continued. "I suggest we continue this discussion privately, with all relevant parties present." Within minutes, a remarkable assembly had gathered in the airport's sleek corporate meeting space, Dr. Washington and his twins, Douglas Phillips and Patricia Williams representing airline leadership. Captain Harris and First Officer Rodriguez from the flight crew, Amanda Taylor providing legal perspective, Brenda Patterson with her hastily summoned union representative Barry Stevens, and Kevin Miller, who had chosen to speak up about previous incidents. The contrast between the Washington twins and Brenda became even more apparent in this setting. Zion and Zara sat with perfect posture, articulate and composed despite their ordeal, while Brenda fidgeted nervously, her earlier confidence evaporating under executive scrutiny. Patricia opened the meeting directly. "We're here to understand exactly what transpired on Flight 1283 and take appropriate action. Dr. Washington, perhaps you could begin." "Before I do," Dr. Washington replied, "I'd like my daughter to share her experience first. She's been the most directly affected." Zara straightened in her chair, still wearing the blouse stained with cranberry juice. Her voice wavered slightly at first but gained strength as she spoke. "We were excited about visiting Paris," she began. "It's been a dream trip since Mom died. From the moment we boarded, Ms. Patterson treated us differently than other passengers. She checked our tickets multiple times, questioned our presence in first class, ignored our requests for service while attending promptly to others, deliberately spilled a drink on me, and ultimately accused us of suspicious behavior for simply sharing earbuds." Her clear recounting, free from exaggeration but unflinching in detail, created a powerful testimony. "This isn't new for us," she continued, emotion finally breaking through her composure. "At Harvard, people sometimes assume I'm there because of quotas rather than having graduated top of my class. Security follows me in campus stores. But I never expected to be treated as a security threat on an airplane for simply existing in first class with my brother." As Zara finished, Dr. Washington placed a supportive hand on her shoulder, pride and pain mingling in his expression. The room fell silent as her words settled heavily on everyone present. Patricia Williams nodded with understanding that went beyond professional empathy. "Ms. Patterson, would you like to respond to these allegations?" "This is being completely mischaracterized," Brenda insisted. "I was following security protocols based on behavioral observations." "Which specific protocols?" Patricia asked. "Vigilance against suspicious activities," Brenda replied vaguely. "Can you identify the specific suspicious activities you observed?" Brenda shifted uncomfortably. "They were passing items between them and whispering." "The items were earbuds, correct? And the whispering was commentary about a movie they were watching together?" "That's what they claimed, but was any contraband or prohibited item ever discovered?" "No, but did any other passenger or crew member independently report feeling concerned about the Washington family's behavior?" "Not directly, but..." Patricia's methodical questioning exposed the emptiness of Brenda's justifications. With each exchange, the discrimination became more apparent. Barry Stevens, Brenda's union representative, attempted to redirect. "Ms. Patterson has a spotless 15-year record with the airline. This single misunderstanding shouldn't overshadow her career." Amanda Taylor calmly slid a document across the table. "Actually, I've identified 3 previous formal complaints and several informal reports. All involve passengers of color receiving differential treatment. Those complaints were reviewed and dismissed," Barry countered. "Actually," Douglas Phillips interjected, "our investigation indicates those complaints were diverted from standard review processes. They never reached appropriate channels for resolution." This revelation created another wave of tension in the room. Someone had been protecting Brenda from the consequences of her actions, allowing a pattern of discrimination to continue unchecked. As the meeting progressed, Dr. Washington listened intently, occasionally jotting notes on a small pad. When finally asked to speak, he delivered a measured response that drew on both personal experience and professional authority. "Throughout my career as a neurosurgeon, I've worked to save lives regardless of the patient's background," he began. "When someone is on my operating table, their race, religion, or wealth never factors into the care they receive. That's the standard I expect when my family and I are customers, to be judged by our conduct, not our color." He paused, looking directly at Phillips and Williams. "Today, Sky Global failed to meet that standard. My children were humiliated, their character questioned, and their safety potentially compromised when Ms. Patterson falsely designated them as security threats. All for the crime of being black in first class." His words resonated particularly with Patricia Williams, whose own rise through corporate America had included similar experiences of having her credentials questioned and presence challenged. As the discussion continued, Alicia Reynolds entered with an update that transformed the meeting. The situation has reached national news. Passengers' social media videos have been picked up by major networks. There are currently 4 news vans outside the terminal, and Sky Global's stock has dropped 3% in the last hour. What had begun as one flight attendant's biased actions was now a full-blown corporate crisis with financial implications. Douglas Phillips conferred quietly with Patricia Williams before addressing the room again. In light of the severity of this situation, I'm prepared to offer the Washington family our most sincere apology, full compensation for their tickets, and additional consideration for their distress, provided we can resolve this matter immediately with a standard non-disclosure agreement. The offer hung in the air for a moment before Zion surprised everyone by responding first. With respect, Mr. Phillips, this isn't about compensation, he stated firmly. Financial settlements with NDAs are how discriminatory practices remain hidden. What happened to us today happens to people who don't have Harvard credentials or medical degrees to shield them partially. People without the resources to fight back. Zara nodded in agreement with her brother. We don't want money. We want change. Dr. Washington looked at his children with unmistakable pride. Their mother had raised them to stand on principle, and they were honoring her legacy perfectly. My children are right, he affirmed. This isn't about us alone. It's about addressing a systemic problem. Douglas Phillips leaned back, studying the Washington family with newfound respect. He had expected the typical negotiation over settlement amounts. Instead, he faced something far more valuable, an opportunity for meaningful institutional change. What would that change look like from your perspective? He asked thoughtfully. The question opened a new phase of the discussion, one that would ultimately transform both the Washington family's ordeal and Sky Global Airlines itself. The conference room at O'Hare International Airport had become the epicenter of a situation rapidly spiraling beyond an isolated incident. Outside in the terminal, passengers from Flight 1283 were sharing their experiences with news crews. Sky Global's stock continued its downward trajectory as investors reacted to viral videos and breaking news alerts. Inside the room, a decision had been reached to remove Brenda Patterson from the flight. Captain Harris confirmed a replacement flight attendant was already en route. Yet this straightforward resolution unveiled a new complexity. The passengers themselves had become divided. We have a situation developing on the aircraft, Alicia Reynolds reported, returning from checking on the waiting passengers. Several passengers are refusing to continue the journey if Ms. Patterson is removed, claiming she's being unfairly scapegoated. Others are threatening to deplane if she remains, stating they don't feel comfortable with her service after what they witnessed. The airplane had become a microcosm of broader societal divisions. Some passengers recognized the clear discrimination, while others reflexively defended authority despite evidence of wrongdoing. The Andersons in 7A and 7B are particularly vocal about supporting Ms. Patterson, Alicia continued. They're claiming this is reverse discrimination against her. Meanwhile, at least 20 passengers have explicitly supported the Washington family, with some recording statements for social media. This development created a new dilemma for airline leadership. Removing Brenda might trigger a walkout by her supporters, while keeping her would certainly cause other passengers to deplane in protest. How are we supposed to reach Paris with a cabin divided against itself? Douglas Phillips mused, the irony not lost on anyone present. Amid this corporate crisis, an unexpected educational moment was unfolding several rows back in economy class. 8-year-old Emma Bryant had witnessed much of what transpired and turned to her parents with innocent clarity. Why was that lady so mean to those kids just because their skin is different? My teacher says that's wrong. Susan Bryant, who had previously complained about the delay, found herself struggling to explain to her daughter why adults were behaving worse than the children in her elementary school classroom. This uncomfortable conversation was happening in various forms throughout the aircraft as parents were forced to explain discrimination to curious children who recognized injustice with unclouded perception. Back in the conference room, Tanya Johnson, a black flight attendant with 12 years of experience, arrived as Brenda's replacement. Her assignment to this particular flight was no accident. Patricia Williams had specifically requested her for her exceptional professionalism and ability to handle difficult situations. "I understand I'm entering a challenging environment," Tanya acknowledged after being briefed. "I'll do my best to reset the tone and ensure all passengers receive equal, respectful service." When she entered the aircraft to prepare for resuming the journey, Tanya encountered immediate hostility from Brenda's supporters. "So they're replacing an experienced white attendant with a black one just to be politically correct," muttered Harold Anderson loudly enough to be heard across several rows. "That seems fair." Tanya maintained her professionalism despite the cutting remark, arranging her serving cart with methodical precision while ignoring the hostile stares. Meanwhile, Douglas Phillips made a critical decision that would define both the immediate crisis and his leadership legacy. Instead of remaining in the conference room or retreating to corporate headquarters, he chose to board the aircraft and address the passengers directly, something CEOs rarely did, particularly in volatile situations. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, standing at the front of the first-class cabin while the entire aircraft fell silent. "I'm Douglas Phillips, Chief Executive Officer of Sky Global Airlines. I've been a passenger on this flight today, seated in 2D, observing our service firsthand as I occasionally do." Murmurs of surprise rippled through the cabin as passengers realized the company's top executive had witnessed everything. "What I observed today fell far short of our service standards and our values as a company," he continued frankly. "I want to personally apologize to the Washington family and to all of you for the delay and disruption caused by this situation." His direct acknowledgement of fault, rare for corporate leadership, shifted the energy in the cabin. "Some of you may disagree about what transpired today," Phillips continued. "But as someone who observed the entire sequence of events, I can assure you that Sky Global does not tolerate discriminatory treatment of any passenger, and we are taking this matter extremely seriously." As Phillips spoke, Zion Washington was quietly typing on his tablet in the conference room. With his legal training, he was drafting a comprehensive set of policy recommendations that went beyond generic diversity statements to specific, actionable changes in training, accountability, and reporting mechanisms. "I believe we can transform this unfortunate incident into meaningful improvement," he explained to Patricia Williams, who reviewed his draft with growing appreciation for his insights. Back on the aircraft, the atmosphere remained tense as final preparations for departure resumed. The Washington family returned to their seats, accompanied by supportive nods from many passengers and cold stares from others. An unexpected moment of connection occurred when Susan Bryant approached Dr. Washington in the aisle. "My daughter Emma has a question she'd like to ask your children, if that's okay," she said somewhat awkwardly. "Dar." Washington nodded cautiously, and 8-year-old Emma stepped forward. "Are you really Harvard students?" she asked with genuine curiosity. "My mom says that's a very hard school to get into." Zara smiled, the first genuine joy she'd shown since boarding. "Yes, we are. I'm studying neuroscience, and my brother is studying law." "That's so cool!" Emma exclaimed. "I want to be a doctor too." This simple, human exchange, a child's admiration for academic achievement transcending racial boundaries, provided a glimpse of hope amid the tension. As the aircraft prepared for its delayed departure, Dr. Washington received an urgent call from Baltimore Memorial Hospital's board chairman. "Jeremiah, the hospital holds a corporate contract with Sky Global worth $8 million annually for staff travel. In light of today's events, we're prepared to reconsider that relationship unless substantive changes occur." This development added significant financial leverage to the Washington family's position, not because they sought it, but because institutions were beginning to recognize that tolerating discrimination carried concrete costs. Brenda Patterson was escorted from the airport, maintaining her defiance until the end. "This isn't over," she warned as she departed. "You can't ruin someone's career over a misunderstanding." What she failed to recognize was that her actions had done far more than disrupt one family's vacation. They had exposed systemic problems, triggered a corporate reckoning, and initiated conversations throughout the aircraft and beyond about the persistent reality of discrimination even for the most accomplished Black Americans. As Flight 1283 finally pushed back from the gate, 3 hours behind schedule, the journey to Paris had been transformed into something none of the passengers had anticipated, a first-hand education in the ongoing struggle for dignity and equal treatment that many Americans still face daily, regardless of their achievements or credentials. 6 months later, the Washington family finally stood before the Eiffel Tower, their long-delayed Paris dream realized at last. Dr. Jeremiah Washington captured a photo of Zion and Zara in the exact spot where their mother had posed 22 years earlier. The image bridged past and present, a family honoring a beloved wife and mother while forging their own path forward. "Mom would have loved this," Zara whispered, linking arms with her brother as they gazed upward at the iconic iron lattice glowing against the twilight sky. What had begun as a traumatic experience aboard Flight 1283 had transformed into something none of them could have anticipated, a catalyst for substantial change that rippled far beyond their personal journey. 2 weeks after the incident, Douglas Phillips had personally called Dr. Washington. "Your children's recommendations have been implemented," he reported. Sky Global has instituted comprehensive anti-bias training for all customer-facing staff, created anonymous reporting channels for employees who witness discrimination, and established an executive diversity council with actual authority to enforce policies. What Phillips didn't immediately mention was that these changes came after Sky Global's stock had dropped 11% in the week following the incident, as #FlyingWhileBlack continued trending and corporate clients questioned their relationships with the airline. Financial pressure had accelerated institutional change that moral arguments alone might not have achieved. The Washington twins had become unexpected agents of transformation. Zion, inspired by the events and mentored by Amanda Taylor, had changed his focus from corporate to civil rights law. His first-hand experience of discrimination despite his prestigious credentials gave him powerful insight into the cases he would eventually champion. The most unexpected part, Zion reflected as they walked along the Seine, was discovering how many people had similar experiences but no platform to share them. Indeed, in the months following the incident, hundreds of Black passengers had come forward with their own stories of discriminatory treatment on various airlines. Amanda Taylor had organized these testimonies into a class action lawsuit that prompted industry-wide examination of practices and policies. Zara had channeled her experience into creating a support network for minority students at Harvard facing discrimination in professional and academic settings. Sharing strategies for maintaining dignity under scrutiny became their unofficial motto, providing practical tools while advocating for institutional accountability. Perhaps most surprisingly, the Bryant family had maintained contact with the Washingtons. Young Emma's innocent questions had blossomed into genuine connection, with Susan Bryant confronting her own implicit biases through conversations with Dr. Washington. "Emma has your photo on her wall now," Susan had written in a recent email. "She tells everyone she wants to be a neurosurgeon like Dr. Washington. You've changed how our family sees the world." For Captain Benjamin Harris and Dr. Washington, their connection through Tyler's successful surgery had evolved into a mentorship program for minority youth interested in aviation and medicine. Twice monthly, students from underserved Baltimore communities visited the hospital and airport, discovering career paths they might never have considered accessible. Kevin Miller had been promoted to senior flight attendant after his ethical stand against discrimination. His willingness to speak truth to power, despite potential career risks, established him as a leader in Sky Global's reformed corporate culture. Reporting bias isn't betraying the team, he now emphasized in training sessions. It's upholding our highest values. Brenda Patterson's wrongful termination lawsuit had failed spectacularly when additional victims came forward, including colleagues who had experienced her prejudice firsthand. The public records Amanda Taylor had accessed revealed a pattern too consistent to dismiss as coincidence or misunderstanding. The Washington family's refusal to accept a financial settlement with a non-disclosure agreement had enabled these broader changes. What might have been buried beneath legal paperwork instead became a pivotal case study in corporate accountability. "Your mother taught you well," Dr. Washington told his children as they visited the small left bank cafe where he had proposed to Sarah years earlier. Standing on principle when compromise would have been easier, that's her legacy in you both. As they sipped coffee at the same table where their parents had once planned their future, Zara placed her mother's photo journal on the marble tabletop. "We've visited every spot, Dad. Mission accomplished." Dr. Washington nodded, emotion tightening his throat. "And created new chapters she never could have imagined." The final page of their journey came unexpectedly in their hotel room that evening. The latest issue of Sky Global's In-Flight magazine featured an article titled, "Transforming Corporate Culture, the Flight That Changed Everything." The cover showed Douglas Phillips and Patricia Williams alongside diverse staff members, with a sidebar highlighting the Washington family's role in sparking institutional change. "We had to ground a plane to make them see us as human," Zion observed, reading the carefully worded corporate narrative. "But at least real change followed." Dr. Washington considered his brilliant children, their dignity intact despite humiliation, their principles uncompromised despite pressure, their futures expanding despite obstacles. They had transformed trauma into purpose, confrontation into conversation, and personal injustice into collective progress. "Your Harvard degrees matter," he told them, "but how you stood that day on the plane, that revealed your true education. Knowledge without courage remains merely theoretical." As the lights of Paris sparkled beyond their window, the Washington family had come full circle, honoring Sarah's memory while writing their own story of resilience, integrity, and transformative impact that would inspire countless others facing similar battles on their own journeys. Have you ever witnessed or experienced discrimination while traveling? What would you have done in Dr. Washington's position? Let us know in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear this powerful message about standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult. Your support helps us continue sharing these important stories that need to be told. Thank you for joining us today, and remember, change begins when brave individuals refuse to accept injustice as inevitable. This powerful story reminds us that discrimination persists regardless of education, wealth, or status. The Washington family's experience demonstrates that even Harvard credentials and medical accomplishments provide no shield against racial bias. What truly matters in these moments is maintaining dignity while standing firm for justice. Dr. Washington showed that refusing quick settlements in favor of systemic change creates lasting impact beyond individual situations. The transformation of Sky Global Airlines proves that institutions can evolve when forced to confront uncomfortable truths. Most importantly, this story highlights how speaking truth to power requires extraordinary courage, yet remains necessary for progress. The Washington twins demonstrate that the next generation can transform painful experiences into purposeful action, creating support systems that didn't exist for their parents. When we witness injustice, remaining silent only perpetuates the problem. True change requires both personal courage and collective accountability, a lesson this family embodied with remarkable grace under unimaginable pressure.